I didn't want to forget it this time.
We'll just give it one more minute for folks to get back. And so, Erin, are you in a spot that you're ready?
Yeah, I always accidentally turn my camera off with my hands. So I'm sorry, I thought my camera was on. I have like a complicated relationship with my mouse pad.
So Erin and I have worked together a little bit, kind of developing a relationship with special services in regards to what business managers need to know. And a lot of this obviously is revolving around CDS and what's happening in the CDS world. We're obviously in communication as well with Vicki Wallach at MSMA in regards to CDS. And I know we all have challenges and concerns about CDS. I felt it, we as a group felt it was important to have Erin kind of do a presentation about where things are at, be able to answer folks' questions, and really be able to have some discussion around what's going on in special services beyond CDS as well. So I do appreciate Erin reaching out. She had asked for some representation from MeASBO as well, and serving on a group that is working on CDS, so that there was a business manager representation on that. And I do thank you, Erin, a lot for that. I think it's really important to have the business and financial aspect of what's going on with potential changes there as well. So I'll turn it over to you and let you go from there.
Okay, well, first I have to give a shout out to Zach Harding. Oh my gosh, hi Zach. Haven't seen you in a long time. Zach was in my previous SAU down in New York. It's nice to see all of you today. Thank you for having us. I also have my colleagues, Roberta Lucas, who's the state director of CDS, and Barbara McGowan, who used to be just not really. She was the fiscal director for, birth school age children. And then I said, Barb, you don't have enough to do. So I think you should go down to 0 and make a nice continuum. So she is now the fiscal director that is overseeing CDS and special services. So her role expanded a bit, but we wanted to make sure that things were consistent across the levels of special education. So, so an update on the LD, which asked the Department of Education to create a transition plan for 4-year-olds to transition back into the SAU. And it also asked us to consider what to do with 3-year-olds. And you may or may not know that Maine is very unique in terms of, we are the only state that has a quasi-state agency that administers or oversees special education and provides the FAPE offer, the free appropriate public education offer, to 3 to 5-year-olds. 95% of the states have 3 to 5-year-olds in their SAUs, their equivalent of the SAU. And then there are some that do it a little differently, but Maine is unique for CDS. So in our proposal, we felt that the 3-year-olds having a separate entity that just looked after 3-year-olds was not conducive to, it would create too many transitions for parents. It would be another organization. So now we have a Part C organization looking at birth to 3. We didn't want just a separate entity for 3-year-olds. And because most of the country does this effectively through contracted providers, we wanted to make sure that families had consistency as soon as the children entered free appropriate public education land at the third birthday. So we made our plan. We have a transition plan. The bill that we helped draft and then support requires a transition plan for SAUs. So the transition of FAPE responsibility would occur in July 2024. CDS as an organization would remain intact until 2026, where there would be a final transition of these services to all of you. And there is a fiscal management team, of which we have a participant from your organization on. We also have a special ed director, a principal, and a superintendent joining that group, along with members of this team in the DOE to effectively work out how to transition these services fiscally to SAUs. The bill does support 100% of payment of special education services for preschool aged children beyond 2026. So as we transition, as you assume full responsibility for these children, 100% of the special education services will be paid for by the state. Additionally, 100% of their public education will also be paid for by the state. So whereas now, those of you who are working with 4-year-olds, you know that 4-year-olds are in the EPS funding formula. So you would draw those monies typically as you would school-age children. You also probably know that 3-year-olds aren't considered in a funding formula. They're just not considered in any law. They're not in public preschool is not considered 3-year-olds. So we're working to make sure that all the statutory changes that include those 3-year-old groups are going to be in place by the time this transition occurs. So the funding formula would support 100% of special education and the general education cost for those children. And so that is what that group is working on. And we're trying to also, one factor that we're considering here is that many people have said, CDS has been underfunded all these years, right? And we also know that CDS hasn't had the capacity to serve all children in special education historically. So one thing we are doing is rapidly building infrastructure to be able to handle 100% of the need that occurs in our state. In our plan, we have a provision in the law. It has a provision that compensatory education services that are accrued before 2026 will also be the responsibility of the state. So we're trying to make this as minimally fiscally invasive as possible for all of you so that you can feel confident that you are going to be able to fiscally support these children and that their expense and cost won't be falling onto your tax base, because that is very unpopular all around. So that is basically the premise of the bill. We also, and Barb and Roberta know that they'll stop me talking if I say anything out of turn. But Barb, we are working also on a mechanism like the state agency client mechanism where you get reimbursed more immediately for a cost so that you don't have to shell out money and then get reimbursed for it, because we know that many of the smaller SAUs won't be able to front load a bunch of money to be able to pay for special education. So that's basically the bill in a nutshell. We're trying to make it very transparent so that people have an understanding each step of the way. We have a pretty comprehensive transition plan that includes fiscal transition. Those are public documents, so if you don't have them and you'd like to look at them, we can provide those for you. And we feel it's a moral imperative to be able to provide special education services for 3 to 5-year-olds. When these children come to you, having not had the services they require before they go to kindergarten, they cost you more money. they cost you more money in the long run because their need is greater than if they've been provided the early intervention. We all have those, you all know, you have these kids coming in at kindergarten, and there's some of the kids that you didn't anticipate that are very high cost to you. And those kids will be, when you know about them in advance and they're getting the appropriate services, that will be less of a thing that you're not planning for, an expense that you're not planning for, and more of a known entity. So we really feel strongly that it's a moral imperative to get these kids the services. And in the special education world, the special education directors in the state have been frustrated historically about these kids coming in that haven't received the services that they've been due. So that is happening. We also are really incentivizing partnerships with your SAUs right now to develop programming and contract with CDS. We have some SAUs that are going to be hiring staff that we're paying for, administrative staff or special education teacher or related services that we are paying for. And we are also, having people who are going to be having SAUs that are providing every single service to every 3 and 4 year old in their catchment area, and they're just sending the bill to CDS. So we're working in partnership to develop your capacity to do this now so that we have a really good understanding of what those expenses are for all of you. We're also making sure that you know how many kids you have in your catchment area, because there are about 3,200 right now, Roberta. Yes, 3,200 children in CDS 3, 4, and 5 that have active IEPs. And obviously the concentration of the population is in Southern Maine. So if you're in a rural area, your cohort of 3-year-olds might be 2 kids, or your cohort of 4-year-olds might be 5 kids. And especially if you haven't considered who these kids are, it's kind of not knowing how many kids are coming up can be very concerning. So what we've been doing is providing SAUs details about who right now is a 3 and a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, not yet school age, who has an IEP in your area, so that you can start keeping track of how many kids there are and what kind of needs they have. So,
Erin, can I interject with a couple
yes.
of questions that are coming up in the chat? I know, and I've heard this before from business managers, there's a concern overall for those of us who have been in a business manager role for a long time that the state says 100% of the cost. What does 100% mean? Because for a lot of business managers, 100% means 100% of what the state has calculated as an amount that they will pay off of, versus 100% of the cost the district is actually physically incurring and paying out of its checkbook. So when you say 100%, can you clarify what that means?
Yes, it's the latter. So it's paying for 100% of every cost associated with special education, including, for instance, we have an inordinate amount of children right now in special purpose preschools, which are very costly. In fact, a lot of the population, a large percentage of CDS students right now are in very restrictive placements. So they're costly. And we are going to be, the calculation would be not, we'll fund you 100% up to $20,000. It would be, we're funding 100% for every special education cost you incur.
So as school districts get into this and they get into other things such as various supplies that 3 and 4-year-olds need, playgrounds that 3 and 4-year-olds need, are those included costs as well?
Those are not included costs, but if those are things that you're considering, we have this is an unprecedented time in the world where we have an abundance of federal money. So we have a $3 million grant, a $3 million provision right now where we are, having SAUs apply to us to get these costs, and we would be helping you develop them. Also, yeah, so I would say if you need that kind of infrastructure, you want to be having conversations with us soon, because there is money right now to support that. There won't be probably in 2026. But right now there is money to support those kinds of things. The other thing that we're doing is if your SAU is interested, we're going and building that in your community. We've done that in Biddeford, we've done that in Brunswick, we've done it, we're now doing it for Gorham. So we're coming in, we're going to outfit the classroom, we're going to find the space, we're going to go through, there's different requirements for licensing for preschool. We're supporting that, we're getting it all set and ready and bundled in a beautiful package so that in 2026, the only thing that you'll need to do is provide the lease, the CASA lease, and the staff for that. So like I said, those costs are not considered in the formula moving forward, but we do have funds available right now to support those endeavors if you have them.
So some of the school districts are gonna then, if they don't do it in time or the money runs out, then the school district is gonna have to pick up some of those costs. Is that correct?
Yes, the cost that we have, the formula that we're coming through is special education costs, not the cost of facility. Barb, nod your head if I'm correct about that. Yes.
So facilities are a huge concern for a lot. Yeah, I mean, if you read the chat, there's already 3 or 4 who've mentioned facilities. Can you expand upon that? Can you, so
Yes.
let's take a school district that's already maxed out. It has no space. What are the steps that a business manager and a superintendent should be thinking about and taking at this point in considering if it has no current spacing and being asked to take on, let's assume in your example, Southern Maine is the area where there's highest concentration. A school in Southern Maine is saying, yes, I'm going to get an X number of kids, but I have absolutely no space. What does a business manager or superintendent do?
Well, my recommendation to any of you who have not started this work, because there's people in various stages of this work, is to gather a team to start looking at what resources you have and what the services right now are being provided for your children in your catchment area. So let's take the York example. I happen to know there's no space in New York because I've been looking for space when I was there. So, you know, what you would do is you'd go and find all of the private providers, and you may negotiate and say, we don't have space. We don't have a building project in our future. We're not going to be building preschool. So I'm going to contract with the private providers in this area to provide preschool education at a level that is required by MUSER to provide, and then apply special education so that children can access their preschool education in those settings. That would be potentially one option. Finding out where your kids are currently being served right now, if you haven't contemplated it, is going to be really crucial for you. Understanding where your resources are, and then also, you know, really looking regionally at, you know, if I have 10 students and you have 10 students and you have 10 students, maybe together we can lease a building and provide those services in a preschool setting for those children. That makes sense for us because we're only paying a third of that cost because we only have 10 children going there. So that's another thing we consider. We're working today on an extensive readiness checklist that takes a tiered approach to where you are at. You know, there's some people who have been, you know, I don't want to know about preschool. I'm not thinking about it. I have enough going on from kindergarten to 12th grade, and that's where my focus is. So we're going to have procedures for you to do to start your conversation so that in 3 years, you're going to be ready to make this transition, even if all you're doing is contracting with the people who are now providing those services. The one caveat I will say is that in 2024, you will be taking over the FAPE obligation and the administrative costs associated with that. So you all know your special ed directors, they're very busy people. And so you would be taking the oversight that you're currently doing with your IEPs and extending that down to 3 and 4 year olds. So again, you know, maybe you have 20 kids transitioning into your SAU every year. So you're going to be responsible for those kids writing their IEPs, making sure that they are hooking up with the appropriate services, those kinds of things. So that is an administrative cost that's going to be, that I've been telling the special ed directors to kind of think about whether or not in your capacity right now you have, or maybe you have an IEP coordinator in your elementary school. Think about, can that person take on 10 extra kids and make sure they have their IEPs and make sure they're doing their meetings and make sure they're in compliance with the law and make sure all of those things are in place. So that's the one area where in 2024, you guys are going to be taking over the administrative cost of overseeing these kids. But until 2026, you're not providing the service. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and when you're talking about, let's say, leasing a facility, is that going to get reimbursed to the school district if it has no space and it has to lease a facility?
No, not after 2026.
So schools have to prepare that if those costs are getting reimbursed, they're only getting reimbursed to 2026. After that, it's then on the local school district.
Yes. We will have a lot of information for all of you around the costs of those things prior to you building them into your budgets. But yes, the 100% of special education costs would be the provision of special education, not the building site where it occurs, and accessing public education. So those are the two costs that are covered in this bill. And I will say that, sorry, the lights went off. I will say that this bill is now in the House and Senate, and it has to be voted on, and it has to pass in order for this to even happen. Now, Roberta, Barb, and myself are continuing to build this infrastructure and these services because we are not accepting that there are kids who are not getting services in the state. And we also want to prepare them for coming to school in kindergarten. So we're going to continue to do that no matter what happens with this bill. But it has to pass. So I'll put that caveat on there. Like, this is all if the bill passes, and we'll know that by the end of next week, I believe.
So if it passes, those types of costs aren't reimbursed after 2026. Are there other costs that won't be reimbursed after 2026 as well, if the bill passes as it is now?
So the only costs that will be reimbursed are the amount of money it costs you to provide special education. So your teaching staff, your related service staff, transportation, medical staff, nursing, whatever it is you need on that IEP.
Yep.
And the amount of preschool. So this is the weird thing about CDS. CDS is only special education for preschool age students. That's all it is. But we have had to buy preschool education from private entities in order to be able to provide a FAPE offer. So you would be having that cost 100% reimbursed. So if you are contracting with little something daycare down the street to provide 9 hours of general education preschool, you'd be buying that preschool from them, and then you'd be applying the special education service for them to access that program, and 100% of those costs will be covered.
I think the concern from a facility standpoint, I know there's a lot of other questions and I'll move on to the others, but the facilities is a big one because for a lot of districts, facility decisions don't happen in a year or two. Even if it's leasing a facility, they don't happen in a year or two. So for a lot of us, I think, who are in that position, I think a lot of school districts have, and I'm generalizing admittedly, but a lot of school districts have taken the position to bring on pre-K programs, and rightfully so. And those pre-K programs may have been the tipping point of filling schools, and are also seeing, obviously, with COVID times, some increase or anticipated increase in enrollment. So I think as business managers, we're in the position of having to look 3, 5, 7 to 10 years down the road, looking at 10-year enrollment projections and saying, where are we going to put students? And with this, we're also looking at then where are we going to put, 3 and 4-year-old students, and how do we manage that? How do we manage the spacing of that? So the genesis of a lot of these questions about space really come in that background, just so you have an understanding of the business manager side, because we're having to think that far down the road and our brains are turning on. Then I have to try to build into the budget how I'm going to pay for those facilities, whether I lease them or purchase them or build them or construct them.
Let me say this, universal pre-K is offering preschool education to every child in your catchment area that would like to have it, who is 3 and 4 years of age. And there is no bill or no mention of that. And that is not, so when you think about your facilities and you're making these determinations, don't overwhelm yourself by thinking you now have to provide preschool to every child who lives in your neighborhood. You may just be wanting to provide preschool to the 10 kids who need it, who qualify for your, now, granted, I think we should have universal pre-K. It's the right thing to do. But this bill does not force you to provide preschool education to every child who is in your catchment area that is 3 or 4 years old. So if it helps to even think about that, it's if you, and again, we have data, we've given a lot of data out. I have a document right now where every town, it breaks down how many 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and then in the fall, and I can easily send that to you. Because when you look at that, you're not going to get this idea that you have to start providing, like, let's say you get 50 kindergarten kids in every year in your school, and you're like, how am I going to now have 54-year-olds and 53-year-olds? That's not what this bill is. You are literally only responsible for the 10 kids in your catchment area who are identified in special education. And again, I would like everybody to have universal pre-K because it's better for your population. It's better for everybody. But just if that helps you in the transition to think, don't think that you have to serve every human that's 3 or 4 years of age in your catchment area. That helps. I don't know if that helps.
Understood. And I'm just going to go through some of these because there's a lot of them. One is we have many unfilled ed tech positions as well, and several have resigned. I think that's just a general labor about ed techs, but also I think it applies to other areas as well, putting a labor strain on. What does the timing of reimbursement look like, Erin?
So I'm going to kick that to Barb. Hunting that.
Good morning. So Erin mentioned this would be like a state agency client model. Hopefully you would get your invoices in by the 15th and we could turn them around, within the month, get them back, get the reimbursement back to you. That's the plan right now.
Lisa, in response to yours, I think I've just answered that. Yes, it's going to be similar state agency clients. Lisa's comment is, my concern is the hourly cost for contracted services for one school may be more or less than the cost for another district. Therefore, how do we know what the actual cost is for each district?
You would base that right off your IEP. So however many services are on that IEP would be the cost of your provider. And FAPE for 4-year-olds currently is 9 hours. FAPE for 3-year-olds is 6 hours. So that's how much programming you would buy, unless you offer preschool right now, because then that becomes your FAPE offer. So if you're offering 15 hours a week of pre-K education, that would be how much pre-K you'd be buying.
If we need their additional administration, will that be covered under the 100%?
Likely not.
Did you say the grant would be available, would be possibly cover the cost to construct a building?
No, it will not cover the cost to construct a building, but it would cover outfitting a classroom with little tiny furniture and the curriculum materials and playground equipment, potentially small toilets, things like that.
If there are school sped staff providing service to 3 and 4-year-olds, I assume some kind of time and efforts required each month. Is that accurate?
Yeah, same as it would be now. So if you have, any staff funded under your local entitlement grant, then they would have to do time and effort.
I think this question comes from the fact that transportation is such a hard issue right now for school districts. Will transportation be required for the district to provide for these students? And if so, will it be reimbursed?
It will be reimbursed and it will be required only for special education students.
Correct. So it seems like the meaning of 100% is a little bit different. Yeah, I think, 100% depends on which area. So 100% of staffing, it sounds like, is covered. But when you get into peripherals, I use the playground as an example. I use the facility, those types of areas. Those are incumbent upon the local district to provide with local tax dollars.
Yes.
I think I made it through all the chat questions. If someone put a question in chat and I did not read it, can you please either put it back in or unmute yourself? I tried to get them all. Hopefully I did. Or are there others that have questions?
I'll just talk about the staffing. We are also struggling with staffing in CDS. In fact, our wages aren't as competitive, nor our benefit packages as competitive as what you offer. But we did get a very large grant to increase the certification of our CDS staff. And we are doing transition planning for CDS staff because you are going to want these people to work in your SAUs. They have all the experience in our state working with these children, and they're very good at what they do. So we are thinking about how we can find staff for you. And then the department itself in special education, we're doing things to, recruit more special education staff. So that's happening in the department as well, just because we understand staffing is a nationwide issue, especially in special education, but we're doing some work on trying to make sure that the staff are available for you all.
If we are a 4-year program, I'm assuming it is in the best interest to start looking at how a 3-year program would fit in for next year.
Yes, in most states that do this, they contract with private providers to provide these services. It's not the same amount of school that a 4-year-old would access. So it makes a lot of sense for you right now, if you're already working with 4-year-olds, to find out who your 3-year-olds are and where they are getting their services. And there are 2 or 3 SAUs that are working with 3-year-olds right now. So you might want to go to those SAUs. I know we can get that information to you.
I know we've been talking in the realm of this is what happens if next week this gets approved. Can we talk a little bit about what the other options are if it doesn't get approved, Aaron? What are next steps in this process, just so that business managers have an overall view of if this doesn't get approved either in committee or the legislature, whatever process it's following, what are next steps?
Well, if any of you have been in education for a long time, I'm sure all of you have, this is not a new proposal, right? Like we've been dealing with this for years and years and years. When is it going to happen? But really, what in my conversations with special education directors, really there is a very big push to make sure that services are available for kids prior to when they come to you, because of the fact that these kids are very costly if they don't get any services prior to entering school. So we have increased our collaboration with SAUs. We're up 66%. We have 36 new SAUs that we are contracting with. Some of them are providing related services. Some of them are providing everything. Some of them are providing ed techs, whatever we can do, because I think it pays in the long run to make sure these kids get early intervention services. It pays to do that. So we're going to keep doing that because we don't believe any child should not have their preschool special education services. So we are, a lot of the special directors we're working with are really eager to know these kids and to start really keeping tabs on them in a way that they haven't yet. So that is what we're going to do, because I think we're at a point now where 60% of our kids are getting the services they need before they get to you. And it's creating a very, very large, it's very costly for the state when these kids aren't prepared and they don't have services. So that's what we're working on. We also have a federal audit, the Office of Special Education Programs from the big DOE federally is coming in to monitor. There will be findings in Maine because we aren't currently serving all of these children. And that could be costly. That could be meaning that we might lose federal funds for that. We'll definitely be on a corrective action plan. So it's not an option not to provide FAPE. It would be as if someone in third grade moved into your school and they said, I'm sorry, Tommy, we don't have special education services for you yet, but we'll get to you when we can. That's not in the law. It's not under IDEA, and it's not ethical or moral on any level. So that is what keeps us up at night and what makes us continue to try to build these programs for kids, because they're costing you money and it's worse for everyone. And the other thing is that the parents are transitioning into your school with a lot of dissatisfaction about special education. And you can talk to your special ed directors. Those meetings are tough when the kid's not getting the services, because you're starting off the gate with a bad relationship with these parents because they're not happy with special education. So again, it only works for everyone to get these services in good services to children before they start in your schools.
So if a business manager wanted to know how many children meet the qualifications, who do they reach out to, Erin? How do they get that information of the number of students in their particular school district?
Well, Colin, I will give you the spreadsheet of every town's current numbers. And you will know how many 3-year-olds. Now they'll be de-identified. So if you want to know really who they are, you can put that request in to, I'm going to say to my assistant. I'll give you that email address, and we can get you, as a special ed director, we can get you the name, we can give you a special ed director the names of the children who are coming. We have been doing that. More and more people are requesting that information, but we can give you the round numbers.
Other questions, folks? And did I miss anyone's question? I think we got to the end, Erin. I think we made it.
Excellent. Yeah, Erin.Fraser@maine.gov. If you have any follow-up questions, like I said, we're trying to be as transparent as possible about this process so we can share anything with you.
How will we know as business managers what happens with this next week, Erin?
Oh, we will let you know. We will let you know. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, the special ed directors will know. I can let you know, Colin, you can pass it along, but once this gets voted on.
Okay.
But even if it doesn't get voted on, please consider expanding your capacity to work with these kids. We need all hands on deck for these guys. These little teeny guys.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Roberta. Really appreciate it. Thank
Thanks.
you, Aaron. Appreciate you coming today.
Yeah.
Going through it with us and answering a lot of questions, and they're important questions for us as business managers to be able to have an understanding of. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you and have a great weekend, everyone.
You as
Bye.
well. If you have more questions, please reach out to Aaron. If you have concerns or questions that you want to raise through MeASBO, please email the MeASBO address, and we will go through those as a group. And I would say that as well for the time between now and fall. We are still meeting as a group. We are still discussing and meeting fairly frequently. And we will be over the summer as well. There's a lot going on that we're staying in tune with. We will try to share that with you as much as possible during the next several months as we go through some of these topics that are pretty significant topics for us as business managers to really understand. Lucy has put the email address for MeASBO in the chat. If you don't know it, it's there. Before we close, I want to make sure that if you folks have questions or thoughts, this is an opportunity before we break for the summer. Please reach out to us. We're here to really do what you want for topics and really provide information and training and to stay in touch. So please let us know.
Colin, can I say something?
Liked it or you didn't like it today, please let us know.
Can I say something about the CDS portion, Colin?
Yep.
So I'm on that committee. So any information or feedback or categories that you want, please make sure if you're emailing Colin or whatever, email me as well. We are meeting weekly. I thought it was going to be a little bit less often, but we're meeting weekly almost. And I would love to hear any information that you have that I can bring back to the committee and hopefully get answers for, because I think we're all coming at it from a different place. So I would appreciate hearing everything that you have.
Diane, can you put your email address in the chat so everyone has it?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, topics before we break for today? Hopefully you feel that today was worth 3 hours, 3.5 hours, almost 4 hours, I guess, of your time. That's the goal. So please let us know how we're doing, good, bad, or indifferent. Diane has put her email address. I'll leave this up for just a few seconds so that you folks have an opportunity to copy down her email address on dboucher@sad15.org. We had a great turnout today. Thank you all. And we will continue to be in touch over the spring and summer. Hope you all have a good day. Executive committee group, we will take 5 minutes and we have a meeting after this meeting. So let's take 5 and then we can regroup. Lucy, can we use that same link?